some things. I don't really know what's going to come out of this. We did a student voice webinar on the SOS website. That's available. It was recorded and it's fabulous. Please listen to it. I think different things will come out of this panel today, so they won't be exactly the same. But they really are going to lead this. I'm just a facilitator. And we're going to start with Stephanie Rivera.
Sure. Hello, I'm Stephanie Rivera, and I just wanted to make a correction about my blog. It's not under construction, it's teacherunderconstruction.com. That's the domain, but it's okay. But what I wanted to talk about, I'm passionate about so much in education, but as a future educator, it was after I took my Intro to Education course, and my professor is actually here today, and I just discovered how much the complexities are in the system and what is going on. And I don't know, I felt that the students were being silenced, particularly in urban areas, and that is where I really gained my passion, because I wanted to make sure that their needs were heard by policymakers, because they were just overlooking a lot of what they were doing. And speaking from my own experience, I came from a pretty well-off education, and it's not fair that students are going to school without their basic needs being met, that they can't afford pencils, that there's bullet holes in their windows. That's absolutely not acceptable. Every school should have a quality education. And the work that I'm doing with Zach and other students and other student organizers with StudVoice.org is we're empowering students by giving them a voice and kind of centralizing what we're all doing, because I just recently found my voice. I would never expect myself to be here today. And what I advocate for is we should not be waiting until students are in college to find their voice. As a future educator, I want to be able to give them the opportunity to find their voice and speak about what they're passionate about, speak up about that they don't like standardized testing, that they want to opt out. Give them the option to do that, because a lot of them aren't aware of that. I did my own personal research for the webinar about students and opting out, and the responses were a little, I don't know how many attended the webinar, but students were saying it's an accurate measurement of my intelligence. I didn't feel the need to opt out. Every student should take it. It was just really scary, because that's how I went through high school. I don't know if that's the same with anyone else, but I just accepted it, and I think that's a lot of what students are doing today, is they're just kind of accepting it and not realizing that opting out is an option. That was another common response, that they had no idea about, that teachers should have told me that this was a chance, or I don't know. It's just a lot of responses that I'd love to share on my blog with you further down the line. And another thing that I did with my blog was I recorded the amount of student protests that have been going on. Currently there is about 178. When I first did this, I only found 150. And what I found interesting is that there are 8 states that I couldn't find any protests in those states, and I'm trying to figure out, maybe, is their education better there? Are they more afraid? And how can we reach out so we can make this a national movement in every single state, that we are all opting out or standing up for what is right and what we want in our education? And that's pretty much all that I'm very passionate about and want to speak about, and would love questions later on about what you have.
So if the panelists here would have any comments or questions for Stephanie, let's go ahead and have a conversation. Relax.
I'd actually love to know the 8 states.
It was, I know, Hawaii, North Dakota, South Dakota, Arkansas.
I think so.
What was the other
Have to
one?
pull it up on
It's on
Twitter.
Twitter. I tweeted about it. I can get you that list for later on. And then the highest states, I believe, were New York, California. I know that New Jersey had 10 at least. There's a whole list. I'll definitely share that with you guys later.
What was that question? I didn't hear what your question was.
Oh, she had referenced in her comments about 8 states that didn't really have a student voice
Right.
presence, and I was trying to ascertain what those states were.
Any other questions or comments from the panelists for Stephanie?
What was the chief motivator for students to protest that you found?
Oh, that was standing up for teachers. That was the biggest reason students were protesting, was standing up for their teachers.
What?
And Stephanie, I just noted on the webinar a question that I felt was really important. What made the protests effective versus non-effective?
I think the numbers were definitely very effective. I know there was huge walkouts where they were filling the streets, and then as opposed to others, there was about 5 or 10 students outside of school. People were laughing at them. Teachers didn't take them seriously. So that's another thing to take into consideration. How can we get more students involved and believe that their voice matters and that they can, in fact, make a change?
I have Steph's list. The states are Alabama, Arkansas, Hawaii, Kansas, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, where students' protests haven't taken place.
That was too fast for me to read.
Oh, do you want me to
That's
say
okay.
that?
No, that's okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. Good.
I wanted to say something. I know you said the protesters mostly were standing up for the teachers, and I know in Detroit they have been standing up for teachers, and not only for teachers, but to defend the right to go to a public schools in Detroit, because so much of this year, like the schools have, like the EFM, the Emergency Financial Manager, has closed over 50 schools in the last 3 years, and every year the students of Detroit have fought against that, and actually won some schools from being staying open. We've walked out. We've occupied the buildings at Catherine Ferguson Academy, which is a school for pregnant teens, which was slated to be closed last year, and we occupied the building for the whole spring break, and students got arrested, and like before the school was to close, we called for a rally to occupy again after what we had built on. We had got so many students out mobilized. It's 15 students sat in during spring break, and they're ready to sit in again. And like a charter school company came along and saved it. And we're saying that although the charter school did come along and save it, but they have some schooling to go to. And I think if we just fight and use the students do have a voice and they can use it. They just have to fight to win.
Thank you. So I'd like to open it up to the audience at this time, and it looks like there's quite a few questions. So in the red, please.
So Stephanie, you talked about this a little bit earlier. You alluded to it a little bit when you were talking about the opt-out webinar. But what ideas do you have for addressing the really deep conditioning that kids have not to use their voice? Because they're taught from a really early age that students should be seen and not heard. They should always defer to adults. That they should be obedient and quiet. So what ideas do you have for, giving them opportunities and teaching them, interrupting that?
Okay, coming from my own experience, I grew up from an immigrant culture family, so my family was very quiet. I was never taught to value my opinion, just listen to authority, listen to what they have to say. Adults are always right. And so that's how I went through school. I recently wrote a post about this too, is just how I was just so afraid all the time of being wrong or what the teachers were going to say. I was so afraid to challenge what was accepted as the norm or what was set by the politicians or policymakers. So as I'm studying education and want to be a future teacher, I don't know, how I see it is that you just kind of show them what's going on across the country, show them that it's actually being effective, that people are actually listening and that they can make a change. As with the student voice movement, that they're being heard, they're being seen by news, they're being seen by teachers all across the country, and when students see that their voice is valued, which is what I wish I had the chance to do in high school, I don't know, if I could have been this way back then, I don't even know where I'd be right now, but I would just love that if one of my teachers showed me that your voice can make a difference, just like guide them. I think that's what I hope to do as future educators, to guide them the right way and to really help them make a difference.
Can I say something on that?
Sure.
I agree with Stephanie, and also that the students, like when teachers go on strike, students will join you. Like in 2006, I was in middle school, and like the teachers went on strike that same year, and I was on the picket lines with them. And like if the teachers and students connect, like they can be drawn into the fight, because our fight is your fight, and your fight is our fight, because public education should be a right. And we're fighting for a right to save public education.
Thank you. And we, as teachers, appreciate that support. And I mean, I find it phenomenal, these students. I'm happy to support their voice. They're amazing. More questions, go ahead.
I also think that, I believe you are from university, correct? Okay, so what I'm thinking of is I'm from the same university as Stephanie, and maybe some of the university groups could unite together because we have strength in numbers. So if the two of you can get together and the others on the panel exchange emails, those of you who don't already have that information, and unite together and exchange ideas, that would help. Also, another thing that Stephanie does is mentor. So I think the university students who seem to realize, all of this freedom of idea and expression, mentor the high school students, and then just go down, the high school students mentor the middle school students, and so on. And then we'll get it down to a much younger age, and hopefully it'll filter up. Some of the ideas that you expressed before about children should be quiet and that type of thing. Well, change happens gradually, and that type of change we already see in the elementary schools. We see children who are not really sitting there and being quiet. I think it's been a while since children in the elementary schools have actually sat still and not expressed themselves. They feel more and more the freedom to express themselves. So I think this is a great time for this type of a movement.
And going off my list of protests, there was as young as elementary students protesting, as well as graduate students. There's a wide variety of range. I hope all of you check it out eventually. It's really cool to see.
More
If
questions?
I can just jump in on that, 2 points. One, on the issue of uniting university students, I think one of the things that I recently stumbled upon, and maybe I'm new to it because I've been out of university for quite a few years, there is a counterforce growing in the student voice movement on the opposite side of the issue. There is an organization out that I just became aware of called Students for Education Reform.
Yes.
They are growing in leaps and bounds across the country on university campuses. They are being funded by, supported by folks like Stand for Children, 50 Can, and all of the folks that are sort of in the charter privatization movement. TFA, I think, is one of their supporters, et cetera. So what they are doing, and doing so pretty much under the radar screen for the most part, is they're going in, talking to university students, folks at their age, getting them before they become teachers, talking to them about education. We got to make some change, and they're doing it in the lens of sort of Democrats for Education Reform. We've been robbing these students of a good education for all these years, and it's the system that's bad, and the status quo is what's hurting them, and we have to be the change. So they're coming into their own student voice, but they're coming into it from the space of, well, charters are a good thing, vouchers are a good thing, and we're the students who need to bring that change. They are the equal and opposite counter voice of the students that you see sitting here. So that threat needs to be taken very seriously, and we need to be continually supporting their voices in opposition to that. That's one. Two, as a high school teacher, I taught sophomores and seniors, and one of the things that I've come to understand is that so many of our youth activists, for whatever reasons, good, bad, and indifferent, do not know the history of student voice and the impact that that's had. They don't know that it was students who pretty much carried the civil rights movement. They were the ones who walked out of their schools. They were the ones that were the reason why lawsuits that led to Brown happened. They don't know that it was youth, their age, college-age students who got on buses, risked their lives, got beaten. Some of them were writing, if I die, this is what I want to happen before they boarded buses. A lot of our youth don't know that happened. So they don't know that there's a history of youth leading this movement. They sort of see the adult folks kind of taking the realm and moving it forward. And instead, we adults need to, number one, make sure they know that history. Two, be confident that if students in the 50s and 60s could do this, that students now are even more capable, given that they have a heck of a lot more resources and know-how at their disposal, and lead from behind. And I think that's the biggest thing as an adult I try to do, is lead from behind. Let them know what their history is, but then let them chart their future and lead from behind.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
This is for Stephanie, for your research, and for everybody else. There was a young group of folks in New York a couple years ago that called themselves YEARNS, Youth Researchers for a New Educational System. And the YEARNS report can be gotten online, YRNES. Just Google it and you can find it. Young people research 500 other young people in New York City, so you have a research base
That's
in an
awesome.
urban setting. I'm
Thank
sorry I
you.
didn't bring the copies of the booklet, but you can all download it.
Thank you so much.
And the kids now are in college, so we did a videotape, a YouTube of them 3 years later looking back at that experience. And you can, you can Google it in YouTube. The New York City public school system isn't working.
Thank you. Go ahead,
I was just
please.
going to say, when students say that they're standing up for their teacher by taking the test, do they mean they're standing up for their teacher's belief in the test? Or do they mean they're standing up for their teachers not losing their jobs?
Teachers not losing their jobs is what they were protesting about. When their teachers got laid off, they would protest if they were getting fired, or just kind of, or even like teacher evaluations. They were so against the kind of the way that they were valuing their teachers, and they didn't think that was right for their
So
teachers.
maybe one thing teachers could do is say outwardly that they're not for the test, but they have to do it or they'll lose their job, so the students know exactly where they stand. I don't know if that's.
I think a lot of teachers do that already. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but
Yeah.
I know some, I won't name names, but I know some people who.
Thank you.
So-
Just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
just on the students standing up for a teacher to defend her job, in Berkeley, California, a teacher named Valerie Trahan, she had to go towards the peer review board, the peer, so they can evaluate her. And she's a teacher that wants the students to critically think about. She's I want to say history teacher. She wants her students to do really critical thinking, so she doesn't really teach the curriculum. She teaches, but she wants to go off the curriculum. And like they tried to fire her, and the union supported them firing her. And like one of our BAM organized, Yvette Falarka, had to fight with her and fight to say that she did nothing wrong, and the students stood up with her, and we got her job. We kept her from not being fired. And like those are the kind of students, those are the things students can do, is to join BAM and continue to fight. Like what Tina was saying, that the students, like civil rights, we don't know about the civil rights movement, but I think now the students are becoming aware that it was the Little Rock Nine and that made it all possible for public education for black and white. So.
Thank you. Ruth?
So I was wondering, Stephanie, when you talked about the cultural background that you came, where your voice at home was not, and that's typical to, many, but I know in the Latino community that's another word they use, that, the children speak when chicken pee. I don't know if they ever do something. But how did your family react to your activism? And I want to link it to my workshop this afternoon, which is family and community involvement. How can we unite the youth voice and the family so that we could have a stronger, voice in combating? Because just like Tina mentioned, the students are in the universities. This corporate takeover, they have taken every sector that they can grab onto. And they have the parent trigger, which is another group. Now they have parents on their side, so they have convinced almost the entire, sector. So first of all, how did your family react to your activism, and maybe the other members in the panel? And how can we bring families, to the table so that we can unite?
I hope I don't disappoint you with my answer, but my parents kind of don't really understand what I'm doing, and it's really sad because it's with like tuition and that, all they ask whenever I tell them about my accomplishments, they say, "Are you getting money for it? Are you getting money for it?" And it's like, what I'm doing is so much, worth so much more than money, and it's hard because my mom, I don't know, she's from the Philippines, and she's only lived in America for about 30 years, and she just doesn't understand what I'm doing. But I mean, she says good job, but they still don't understand the importance of what I'm doing. And I don't know if that's something you want to look into, and how we can really challenge that parents need to kind of be more open-minded. I don't even know how to reach my own parents, but that's my personal struggle that I'm facing at home, and just something to think about.
For me personally, I found I think in general, when you call upon students to speak out, you'll find their families supporting them as well. I don't think we should be waiting for students. I think we should be calling upon them, but at the same time, I think this should be a student-led movement. You see the corporate performers saying we're putting students first, and I think we're not doing enough of that. I think we're kind of, saying we're fighting against that rather than fighting for something. And I think we need to start fighting for students and reframe the message saying we're fighting for students. And from there, you're going to find a lot of people supporting this movement, all America really knows is public school as it is today. People don't really like change. We need change, there's no doubt about that, but we don't need the type of change that the corporate reformers are trying to push for. We have great teachers, we have a great education system as it is, but we need to push for more student involvement in the system because even Arnie Duncan said that the students know what's wrong with the education system before anyone else. And because we, like you guys, are a part of the system. Everyone else who's trying to reform the system is looking at it from an outsider's point of view. And I think we need to really make sure that the student voice gets out there and then the family's going to follow afterwards.
Can I just put in one thing? I always think it's really interesting because I call it I'm in the in-between because I'm a student, but I'm also going into education. And I know I'm learning so much about what it takes to be an educator, and it is not easy, and it is ridiculous. But the thing is, I absolutely support the student voice, obviously, because I'm here, but I think students also have to be cognizant of what it takes to be an educator because there's so many other components that go into educating and I think there needs to be like collaboration or just listening from both ends, I think, is very crucial if we want the change that we all have a common vision, I believe. I strongly believe that we all have a common goal, but we all have to listen to each other and, work together. I think it's very important.
I think it's also important to note that there are groups out there that have figured out this synergy between parent and youth voice. The one that comes to mind for me is Padres y Jóvenes Unidos in Colorado. That is clearly, a great example of parent organizers, youth organizers on the same page, forwarding and advancing the same information, the same movement. And this, in terms of culture, it's a shining example of how you can still sort of have very strong cultural ties to, because I am Latina, I'm part Latina, to a culture that is very clearly, sort of majoralistic in terms of, parents are the ones who are in charge, kids are the ones who are seen and not heard, and sometimes you aren't even seen. You can have a uniting of that culture. You have a uniting of parents and youth together, fighting on the same page, and it works. And there's still a system of mutual respect happening, and they're making progress. The advancements that they've made just in the last couple of months on pushing back on student discipline and zero tolerance policies in Colorado is something that we need to be elevating. We need to be kind of pushing that into an echo chamber to let folks know that this stuff is happening, that groups like this exist, that this is possible, and it doesn't upset the apple cart, as it were, in terms of, we don't have kids running around being disrespectful for, folks that are concerned about that being an issue with youth voice. I also think that one of the things that we need to do to help sort of a situation like Stephanie's, and I sort of come to this vantage point as an aunt of 16, when my older nieces and nephews decide to take to Facebook or take to Twitter and rant about something, I'm really quick to sort of remind them, don't put something out there unless you've done your research. Don't put something out there unless you really make sure you can back up what you're saying. It's not because I don't want them to speak. It's because I want to train them to be prepared for pushback. So if we are teaching our youth from a very early age, have a voice, but have something to back it up with too. Understand that not everybody is going to agree with you, but engage in rhetoric. We don't teach rhetoric anymore. I graduated from high school in 1990. I actually took a rhetoric class. I don't know if anyone teaches that anymore. We haven't taught our students how to debate and back it up with facts. Debate, back it up with research. Debate and back it in a way that's not confrontational in terms of arguing and bickering, but having a debate. We need to train our youth and our kids from an early age to do that, so by the time they get to be high schoolers, they can have a respectful conversation with an adult but completely disagree with them and feel their voice and not be challenged, feel like they can't express that. And I think that's something we adults have got to learn to do better for them.
I agree. I think that there's a big problem in this movement today. On all sides of the spectrum, no one really understands what respectful dialogue is, because everyone seems to, there's one side of the spectrum and the other side of the spectrum, and there is no, way to unite, because one side hates the other, and that's a big problem. Actually, we saw that recently, very recently, with UFT President Randy Weingarten and former CNN anchor Campbell Brown and Students First in New York, because Campbell Brown wrote a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that the union was standing up for sexual predators in the classroom. And so Randy obviously had to defend herself, and at the same time they got into a very, very bitter fight. And it was immature. Everyone from every side, I called them out for it a student called them out for it in a opinion piece online. And I think it was really, for me, it was the first time I realized what the politics of education like. It's kind of disgusting. It's we're not fighting for students anymore. We're not fighting. An educator, Chris Lehman from Philadelphia, put it perfectly. He said they weren't arguing to learn; they were arguing to win. And too often in this education reform conversation, we are fighting to win, and that's not the goal. We're fighting for the students, and we're fighting to learn how to create a better education for our students.
I just want to mention it. I want you guys, the panel, to answer this one question, as in the spirit of what you just said. What are schools for? If each of you could just answer that.
5 words or less.
5 words or less?
As many words as you want.
No, that's 5 words or less. Let's try.
I don't know. For me, it's kind of, I wish that school was more about finding what I'm passionate about, what I can do, what I can contribute to this world, and really just engage in that. I don't know, there was just so much, as I'm sure you all know already, but like with standardized testing, I wish I could have put the effort that I put into studying for tests or studying for things that I wasn't very interested in, but into something more passionate, or what I really want to do when I grow up, or what I don't know, there's just so much. I always say there's so much more to like the human being than what we are really putting into our schools right now, I think, and we're just like kind of restricting or limiting that. And
Well, what do you think schools should go loud to send the microphone?
Pardon?
The
Don't
tape.
do the tape thing. Yeah.
Okay.
What are schools for? Yeah, what do you really think they're for?
Right now.
Yourself, not what you had in school, but what do you think they should be for?
what they should be for,
She said it.
Oh, she said it, okay.
Language you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think you did say it.
yeah, something for the students.
All right.
Well, I think the biggest problem today in education is that we're trying to prepare kids for a world that we don't even know exists yet, and it's hard to really say what education should be because the world's changing at a more rapid pace than it ever has before, and I think we need to prepare students for a changing world, make them adaptable to society, and I also think that we should be preparing students to not be obedient any longer. We need to prepare students to be, I don't love to use the word leader because I think it has a negative connotation. I think in today's society we need organizers who have leadership characteristics, but what they're able to do is, one, they understand people, and two, they're able to put the cause before their title, whether that be their job or starting a movement. So I like to use the word organizer, but I think we need to prepare students to stand up for what they believe in and no longer just sit back and let a select few control the rest of society.
I think the public schools should be to educate and for students to have the opportunity to critically think about what's going around in their society, because what we just discussed, you don't have that opportunity to do it at home because you're told that, oh, students are to be seen, not heard. I think at school you need to really critically think about what's going on in today's society and critically think about anything like public education, who you are as you need to critically think about who you are as a person. Like I was a closet gay person at home, and like when I got in school, like I had to critically think about who I am, and I had to become who I was outside, like in school and outside at home. So I think we should be critically thinking about what's going on in today's society. And just to go back on some stuff that the panel has said, we need to fight to win, and the students, and about the families joining us, the students need to lead, and then the families will follow. I know, and I don't know if people have seen this movie, Walkout. It came out in 2006. It's about the LA walkouts in around the Latino studies. They were cutting the Latino studies, and it was a movie made about it. It's a true story, and they did like walkouts. And at the end of the movie, it ends with like their final walkout, and like the families, like the main characters' families, come out in like thousands and like walk behind them. Like they're about to get arrested, but they come out in thousands and like walk behind them and like start singing this song, and the movie ends. And I think the students will like today the students are ready to fight and lead the fight, because that's the only way we can win is the students lead the fight. And just on the Randy Weingarten issue, and with students, Randy in Detroit at the AFT convention, she was at a Detroit Federation of Teachers rally, and I was holding a sign that said "Strike" for the teachers of Chicago, like because they authorized the strike authorization, and this is the only way they can win their demands is to strike. And that was our main focus, is to have the Chicago teachers strike, because they will win their demands if they strike. So I'm holding the sign, and Randy tells me, she sees the sign, and Randy tells me, honey, please do not hold that sign. Students can't tell me what to do. So like they want to say, oh, it's all about the students, but they don't want to hear from the students, and that's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed and heard.
Thank you. Tim has a question.
It's like a question and a comment, and you brought it back to Stephanie's original point. In one way, just a personal experience, whether it's a Filipino mother or if it's a white mother like mine, their idea for me when I graduated college as an elementary education teacher, they were satisfied that I had achieved their goals. And when I went for my master's degree, they were concerned, why would you, but then they realized that was it. When I dropped out of teaching and went back for my doctor's degree, why would you give up the security that we worked so hard for you to have? And then when I became a college professor and started writing radical things, and now 25 years later, now as an organizer and an activist and things like that, they've started to do exactly what's, at each turn when they see the success that it has brought, they went from I'm going, I don't understand why you're giving up your comfort to move into this uncomfortable zone, because that's all we ever wanted for you. But then they stand up and see the support, and it's been really rewarding to see that kind of support that parents end up, like you say, coming around and saying, this is more than we ever expected out of our son. He's happy, but they always still had that vision of, got a job, you're gonna do fine, be quiet, what are you doing this stuff for? But then every time I did it, I got their support. And so I think parents are reluctantly ready to engage and allow you to be expressive, because it was my experience with mine. They just saw stability as your goal, but when they saw what I was fighting for, they've been so supportive, and they lined up behind me just like you did. So I encourage you to do that, because they might not always do that, but there are a lot of parents out there. What they're really saying when they're asking why you're doing this is, why are you giving up the comfort level that you've achieved for yourself? Why would you make things hard on yourself?
One thing I want to interject here, Nikhil just arrived.
Yes, thank you.
And this is our young man that's the author of All Hands on Deck, Why America Needs a Learning Revolution. This was published in September. This will be published in this September 2012. His articles have appeared in New York Times, NBC, Huffington Post, and Edutopia. And Nikhil has spoken to thousands at conferences and TEDx events around the world. So can we have just, Susan's asking each one of the panel members to talk about what their focus is and where they're at in this education reform debate. So can you share that with everyone right now?
So for the past year, I've been writing this book on education, and I've basically been going to different countries and interviewing people in education, entrepreneurship, and media. And I came across a number of problems when I got into this conversation. When I got into it, I didn't really know how education needed to be changed. I just thought I knew it was messed up in some way because in my experience, I got really bored in class. It was just really irrelevant to me. And then I got into the education debates. I started interviewing a lot of education activists and thinkers. And I came to the conclusion that first, students were just shunned out of the debate. They weren't even allowed to be given a voice. And second, when we talk about education, one of the main tenets is that the model continues to be so industrial and so ancient to our times. So those are two of the issues I'm focusing on right now. And I hope to bring about a conversation across the country because right now we have this model that's so regimented, that's suppressing millions of children around the world. And the last thing we should be doing is bashing teachers, not giving them enough respect, not giving them enough pay. It doesn't make much sense to me. And we should be honoring teachers, we should be giving students a voice and letting all the stakeholders participate in the conversations.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think we got a little bit out of order here, and I just want to give a little bit of time to the other students too. So if the panelists have any questions or comments for Nikhil, then we'll move on to Zach.
My comment is not on Nikhil's point,
That's
but I
okay.
just wanted to go back. Sorry, I just had something to say about the families supporting the students. I just want to say I do agree that the families will support them when we fight, but this youth can have an independent voice, and whether the family support us or not, we will continue to fight and fight to win. And that's one reason that it's so important that the students fight for themselves. And yeah, that's basically it. That's all I wanted to say.